Welcome, everyone, to Drink It In, the podcast, season 13. This season is all about the chosen path. And I was trying to reach out to people who have chosen the path of Judaism. So they are converts. And then it hit me. I have a good friend that I could interview. And I was like, why didn't I reach out? Tehila! So one of the things I love doing is interviewing new people. But another love of mine is also interviewing and schmoozing with my friends because it just has a different feel to it. So everybody, this is Tehila. Tehila, why don't you introduce yourself, where you're from originally, and a little bit what you're up to now, and then we'll get into like the nitty gritty of conversion and what life is like.
Hey, sounds good. First off, thank you so much for having me. And even though I am your friend, it did take a while for you to reach out to me, so I don't know if I should be offended or not. No, I'm joking. When you texted me, I'm like, oh, finally, I've been waiting for this.
I never did converts before. I mean, I had converts, but that wasn't the season. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, well, this is the season. Okay, so my name is Tehila Bollag, and originally I'm from Warsaw, Poland. That's where I was born. But I left Poland when I was a baby. That's why no accent. And I was raised in Chicago, and that's where I grew up. Fun fact, Chicago is actually the second largest Polish population outside of Warsaw, I think to this day, but that's the reason why my family moved there. Big Polish population, community. And when we moved to Chicago, we're immigrants, right? And that was how I was raised, with that immigrant mentality ever since I was a young girl. And fast forward, I went on a journey, which we'll get to soon. And I grew up Catholic. Now I'm Jewish. Baruch Hashem, a year and like 3 months ago, I got married. And now I'm currently living in, it's hard to say, Miami/New York. Yes, yeah, we're exploring. So that's where I am currently in life. I do real estate, and also over the past few months, I've been lucky enough to share a little bits and pieces of my journey on social media, as well as recently in person, in front of big crowds, small crowds, intimate crowds. And that's where we are today.
That was a great intro, Tehila. We were friends a little bit, and then we actually met through Olami and on Spain, actually first time meeting in person.
Yes, I finally got to see what you looked like, not online. I just saw a picture of you was in your car. Good morning, it's time to drink it in. And I met you in person, and you look exactly how you do online. It's a good thing.
It's a good thing, right? I always say that all the time. Sometimes people say I look even better in person, but I'll take it. I'll take the same so that people know that I'm MS, like I'm truthful. But I remember when we were in this car ride, and it was you, me, and somebody else in the back seat, and somebody else had like the real guts, like to really push you with a lot of questions. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're asking her all these questions. Yeah, so I was so shocked that they were asking Tehila all these questions in Spain when I finally got to meet Tehila, and it came out, and she brought out that she's a convert. And then I got to a little bit of a taste of what her story was. So I would love for Tehila to share her story with us and perhaps what drew her initially into Judaism. So what drew you into Judaism initially then, Tehila?
So let's start from the beginning. Okay, so I grew up religious basically my entire life. God was always in the picture. But the thing is, when I was growing up being Catholic, God wasn't in the picture 100%. In Judaism, now that I'm Jewish, Hashem has everything to do with my life. And when you convert to Judaism, a convert, when you go and you dip and you're finally Jewish, you become a different person. You don't just acquire different habits and ritual. You don't have a religion stamp on you. You have a new identity. So when I first found out about Judaism, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but growing up Catholic, that's how I felt. It wasn't a part of me. It was just something that I did. As opposed to Judaism, it's everything that I am now. It's a new identity. So growing up Catholic, that's how I felt. It was really just a hobby, something I did on Sundays. I went to church every single Sunday. And when I was about 9 years old, I remember learning in Polish school when I went on Saturdays. A nun would come in. And I was about 9 years old. I was learning all these new prayers. And that was when I was gearing up for confession. It's when you go and you confess your sins to a priest, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You sit in a black box with a stranger, and at 9 years old, you confess all of your deadly sins that you did. So yeah, that was my life growing up, and I was always traumatized of going to confess. And as you got older, it went from, okay, I said a bad word, to, oh, you could only imagine what teenagers do. I don't know, where I'm from, in the secular world. And when I was about 17 years old, I finally got my own car, and I told my parents I'm going to church, but I never went back. And funny thing is, I remember sometimes I look back in my old life and I'm like, okay, I really wanted to be religious. That was my plan. I'm going to work for a little bit. And maybe when I'm like 30 years old, I'll get married, buy a house, and maybe have kids. But that was like far down the road. But at 17 years old, I was like, okay, I want to be religious one day, but not right now, God. And I had a conversation with God. I was like, okay, God, I love you, but I'm going to live life on my own terms. And that's what I did. So in my teenage years, 18, 19 years old, I started working. I was a waitress in a restaurant. I had a medical job that I did part-time, waitress in another restaurant. I was working 3 jobs, and I was pursuing a career in real estate, doing leasing in Chicago. And here I was living the life, right? YOLO, that's what they say. You only live once. And that was my motto, really, for the longest time. Just make as much money as I can, survive, 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 eat, drink, go out with friends, and travel and enjoy life. And I'm like, wow, this is what life is all about. And anyone could say that, oh, wow, that's so cool. You do whatever you wanted. And that was me. The parties lasted till dawn, till the next day. And then I went back to work. And that was really my life on constant repeat. So I remember when I first met people who were Jewish. And the way that happened is I started working in a restaurant in Skokie, which was in the same parking lot as Shalitz. And it's a heavily Jewish populated community. And I remember I started meeting people my age who were Jewish, and I never met people who were Jewish before. And I was speaking to one of my friends not too long ago, and she's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're Jewish now. I remember we were hanging out on Rosh Hashanah. I'm like, what? It was Rosh Hashanah and we were hanging out? She's like, yeah, I remember because of the Snapchat filters. And she sent me a picture of us in 2017 when I was 20 years old. It said, Happy Rosh Hashanah or something. I'm like, oh my goodness. Obviously I met people who were maybe, on their own journey at that time. But she said, yeah, I remember you asked us, aren't you guys supposed to be with your families? The holiday. And it was very funny. So I started slowly meeting Jewish people and just getting my footsteps into not the Jewish community, but just Jews in general. And working in this restaurant, I also had people come in who were maybe I guess people would say modern, people who ate fish, people who didn't eat any meat, people who maybe were just holiday Jews, where they just kept the holidays, So I started meeting a whole bunch of Jewish people. But when I was about 22 years old, I met people who were from I guess the fromest that I met so far after meeting all these people. And since then, that's when I got introduced to something called Shabbos and kosher. But the way that I found out, here I am just living my life, working every Friday night and asking my new friends to come out with me, but they wouldn't come out on Friday night. So I'm like, what? I would invite them and they would say, oh, we're spending time with family. This was every Friday religiously. So I'm like, okay, what is going on? So I finally found out they were keeping Shabbos and kosher. And then I found out about the holidays. And then after a year of being exposed to a frum lifestyle, I was just blown away by the qualities that these people who were my age, who looked completely normal, were religious. As growing up for me, when people were religious, it was like, okay, you're weird, you're quiet. We had priests over for lunch and they had no personality. So it was just eye opening for me to see someone who was religious, but who was also fun, and with it, but had strong values. Um, so that was my step into Judaism, was meeting people who were from. And then after a while, I was a little bit interested to learn about this lifestyle, just because I love knowledge, I love wisdom, and I love learning new things. So I was very open to it. And then after a while, someone told me about a Kiruv class, which was a Jewish outreach class for people who didn't grow up religious. So I asked my friends, hey, because I thought like, oh, you just sign up and you go. But Judaism, you always have to know a guy to get it in. So it wasn't like that. And also I wasn't Jewish. So it wasn't just, okay, I could show up and learn about Judaism. So one of my friends got in contact with a rabbi, who got in contact with another rabbi, who allowed me to surprisingly join this class. It was all about who you knew. I lived downtown at the time, and it was 2 blocks away from my house. That's also why it intrigued me to go, because it was like on a Wednesday night and it was right there. So I went to that Kiruv class, and slowly I started learning about the mitzvos, I think it was about the Aleph Bays. I was so confused because I never saw this stuff before in my life. But then eventually I went to another class, and that led to another class, which eventually led me to my first time ever experiencing Judaism in person, which was at a Purim party. And I remember I really wanted to go, but I was so nervous to go alone. So at one of the Kiruv classes, I like chased one of the girls out, and I'm like a little girl. I'm like, "Do you want to go to the prom party with me?" Like asking her out to prom. She's like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." So I was so excited to go, and it was in Russ Rogers Park in Chicago, and put on my skirt, just because I'm like, hey, from community, I gotta look the part. Put on a little Cheeto vest, and I remember driving to the perm party not knowing what to expect. And I was with a friend, and we walk in through the doors of the house, and someone opens the door wide open, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, hi! It's so nice to meet you. My husband told me all about you." And it was the Rebbitzin, and it was the rabbi's wife, and she just welcomed me with open arms, and it was so amazing because every time that I went to a party when I was younger, in my teenage years, in my 20s, no one ever greeted me like that, no matter where I was, because they didn't care about, the internal, the you. They cared about the externals, about what you looked like. And it was just so different to be welcomed just for being me. So that was it. That was such a great experience. First time when I walk in, and then I walk into this magnificent party with about 50 people up and around and dancing and having fun. And I noticed that the family, they didn't have furniture in their living room. They had a den with couches and stuff, but across their entire living room, they had a huge table that sat 50 people. Rabbi is like, they use the space to host guests for events like this. And I'm like, huh, I've hung out with some people who were pretty successful, but what did they spend their money on? Stuff that was way different than these people. These people were using it for good,
Right.
for host people, for achnasas archim. And the other people were just doing it, to get attention, nice watches, expensive cars. I mean, people do that also, but I'm just like saying, showing you where the value was, just so eye opening to me that people with, parnasa gave to others in that sense. So that was it. I met the Rebbitzin, I saw that. And then also, the rabbi was giving a speech, and he took a cup of wine, and he's like, this cup of wine right here, he's like, it's just a cup of wine, but I'm going to say a bracha on it, and it's going to be something greater. So through Purim, I learned that we could take in Judaism the physical and elevate it to access the spiritual. In my old religion, physicality and spirituality were two separate
Entities.
ways. Yeah, you can't access them both. It's not possible. And once I saw how easy it was to do that, to access that, I'm like, what? How are people missing the point here?
Right. Wow.
So
That was
easy.
some Purim, Tehila.
It was Purim. I know, it was such a Purim party. It
Yeah.
really made an
Look at
impression on.
that. That impression. I just wanted to tell you, it's interesting to go back a little bit to things you were saying, how 2 points that you made from when you were younger, that you had said that the religion that you experienced was not part and parcel of who you were. It was like a separate entity. There's like religion and then there was you. And it's so interesting. Here, I was raised in an observant home. And I had the same feeling in the sense of I went to modern Orthodox schools and I always felt Judaism was just a subject. It was just like math, Torah, prophets, laws, science, history. It never felt for me until I developed it myself. It never felt part of it. I used to come up with this phrase called, I want to be able to sweat my Judaism. That was the phrase I used to say. I wanted to sweat Judaism so that it becomes part of me, that whatever I do, it's always pouring out of me. So, it's interesting here, even though I grew up, somewhat obviously observant, but I didn't have that feeling either. It took time for me to develop that. And then the other thing I very much related to is when you had said that you grew up religious in your aspect of your life, and you always knew that you wanted to come back to the religion, like whatever religion it was. And so you went to Judaism, but you always envisioned yourself having a religious life, but just not yet. I remember when I was in high school, I'm the youngest of 4 kids. And my older siblings, they are what they call flip outs. We all became flip outs. You know what flip outs are? You ever heard that terminology? Yes, we all became flip outs. For those of you that don't know what it is, if you grew up in a modern Orthodox world and you spend the year in Israel and you become a little bit more outwardly observant, they call you a flip out. You flipped out on the Judaism. So my older siblings were all flip outs. They're a bit older than I am. And they came back and they're like, Jordana, you have to do this. Jordana. I said, leave me alone. You guys did whatever you wanted in high school. Why can't I do whatever I want in high school? Like, why do I have to flip out now? So I remember my sister had said to me, it was like in 11th grade, she says, what do you think is right? I said, okay, I know your way is right. I know I want to do that, but eventually I want to do it. Not yet. And she used to say to me, well, if you know what's right, what are you waiting for? That's what she used to say to me. And so that very much woke me up. And so I started in 11th grade after that whole speech that my sister gave me, that, it sunk in. So, like you were saying, like, okay, you were putting it on the shelf, but you eventually were getting to it just in a different route,
Right.
Just like, and I love how you also presented how the rabbi of that home, that Purim, that is an amazing Purim that you experienced from the moment that you walked in the door, right? I guess, a good way of putting it is that when they noticed you as a human being for who you were, it seemed as if the way you expressed it is that it opened you up and that you were able to take in every experience that was going on at that party. Because the way you're describing it, like I can imagine myself being in the room and with such description and such clarity and how it probably felt when you saw that table and you're like, oh my gosh, these people have guests, like 50 people every week. That's unbelievable. That's unheard of. And then when he emphasized making that blessing, and that's really the essence of Judaism, of being able to infuse the mundane with a sense of kedusha, of holiness. And when it's as if like they just by greeting who you were, who your soul is, it awoke in your soul to be receptive to everything that was going on around you. It's like your antennas were like, ooh, the real Tehila,
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Really, really unbelievable experience. Wow. But I have a question for you. So now you're on this mission, okay? You're gung-ho about Judaism, right? Were there challenges though? Like on that road to learning about Judaism, you're on a high right now, but was there ever a moment in time when you're on that journey before, becoming Jewish that you're like, okay, this is hard. This was a challenge. Did that ever pop up at all?
Converting to Judaism is not an easy thing.
Okay.
But I remember when I first was serious about converting, it was a few months later. Before I was just really testing out the waters. And Jordana, what you said about when you were younger, and baby steps come a long way. And I feel like maybe sometimes when people do take on a momentous change, like converting, which is huge, you have to go with it at your own pace. Because when you start your conversion, obviously, you have to be from and keep a kosher home, and those are big steps. So even before I started my conversion, I was testing the waters to, okay, I'm going to start keeping kosher. Let's see if I could do it even. I remember this was like even after the Purim Party. I was like debating on converting. Like it just wasn't a thought yet. I was just experimenting. But I was like Googling kosher conversions. And I got in touch with a rabbi who had a Facebook group for people who were converting, like a support group. He also gave some shiurim as well. I remember listening to those shares, and I had no idea what he was saying because it was like parsha, but it was so intense and he was using like slang that I didn't understand. And I remember I called him up because I kind of wanted guidance because no one really tells you where to go, what to do. You're just on your own. You want to convert, you figure it out. So everything comes in steps. And when I look back at the story, I'm like, wow, I was not ready to convert yet because I call him up and I'm like, I want to convert to Judaism, but I'm just like so nervous that I'm going to stop at Taco Bell one of these days when I'm hungry. And what if I can't keep kosher? He's like, he was very nice about it. I forgot what he said, but at that moment in my life, I was not ready to take the next step. So slowly I started keeping kosher. I cut out kosher meat and then cheese and then snacks. But if I completely went cold turkey, I'm like, hey, I'm keeping kosher, I'm becoming Jewish, then it never would have worked. So in small increments, that's how I did everything. And by the time I had my first meeting with the Beis Din, I was keeping kosher, keeping Shabbos, and I knew I was ready. But it took a long time to get there. It took about 9 months to mentally prepare myself and also test myself to know if I actually wanted it. And throughout the whole entire conversion process, from when you start to when you finish, my starting point and my ending point, I was a completely different person. Each and every single day, I was transforming and taking on more mitzvos. And I realized that, a few months converting and I was taking on more mitzvos, I slowly started becoming a different person in the way that I spoke to people, in the way that I presented myself, in the way that I carried myself, in the way that I did business, in the way that I spent my money, what I spent it on, and what I looked at. But that all came gradually. And I guess for a person who maybe goes all in, that could be challenging. But when you do it step by step, it really like they're growth pains, like they hurt so good, like I remember when I use everything like exercise. So I was exercising one day and I was like, while I was converting and I was doing a plank. And even though my muscles are hurting and my abs are hurting and my arms are shaking, I'm like, how bad do you want to be Jewish? And it like hurts so good because you feel so accomplished after. Nothing really seems like a challenge, even though there were a lot of obstacles. But I just wanted it so bad that you push through all the pain. Like, for example, like living into a Jewish community was hard. I didn't like my apartment. I moved another time, you know. Thank God I made some friends and we would spend Shabbos together. But I guess reaching out to people out of my comfort zone to invite me for Shabbos was difficult sometimes.
Well, first of all, I want to say there's a reason why we're friends because while you were talking, the only thing I kept on thinking about is exercise is the perfect example that when you push yourself, the days you don't want to go to the gym and you go to the gym anyway, those are the days you have the best workout because you really pushed yourself through the challenge. So I was like, oh my gosh, she's doing the gym. She's doing the gym example of exercise. That's great.
But
It was
even though
it's
I
a
started
good,
running recently, so like sometimes when I don't want to run and I'm there and it's like, okay, just like 30 more seconds and then you feel something when you finish. But it's just death.
but while this is happening, what is your family thinking? Like, what
Oh,
was their reaction?
yeah, my family's very relaxed. Um, my mom, I remember at a point after I decided to pursue Judaism, I said, okay, I might have to tell my mom about this. Growing up as a Roman Catholic Polish woman from Poland, we're very stark. I was very nervous to tell her, but I remember when I confronted her about it, about my decision, she was downstairs doing laundry, and I talk about it in my Living L'Chaim podcast, and She was doing laundry, and I'm like, okay, Mama, like, I need to tell you something in Polish. And so I spoke to her in Polish. I'm like, but then I like was saying at the end, like, I don't know how to even say this in Polish. So I'm like, Mom, I think I'm gonna become Jewish. And she's like, oh, great, you're gonna be rich. Like, she was very like, thank God, my whole entire process, it went smooth as it could have gone. And that's why I think Hashem like chose it for me. Hashem like literally picked me and like took me out of the places where I was, and he said, "All right, I got a plan for you. Just wait and see. Buckle up." And it really went smoothly.
Wow.
It's supportive. My siblings also. I mean, we're very like an independent family in terms of ourselves. So everyone's just like, "Hey, do what makes you happy." I remember I was like making kiddush once, like washing on challah for Shabbos, because we went away to a hotel and my brother was there and he like didn't ask any questions. I'm like, do you want to know what's going on? Or he's like, no, it's just cool. Do you? But thank God. And my friends also, my non-Jewish friends, also very supportive. But I believe it's because I introduced them to it, not from a standoffish aspects. Like I would still go out for drinks with them in a non-kosher restaurant. Like they would get food, and I would get a Sprite or a cocktail, or and they wouldn't ask questions. They're like, "Are you sure you don't want any?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, like it's fine," And let me tell you, those moments really made me grow as a person in terms of self control, because there's nothing harder than to, and I really respect people for who do this to this day, than sitting in a restaurant and not eating anything that looks great because it's treif. But the self control and the discipline that someone carries when they do that is completely unbelievable. Um, really, it's great. Like, how can you sit there and not eat a steak? You just don't. So my friends over time, they're very supportive. And when I started sharing my journey on social media, my friends actually texted me. I moved out of Chicago at this point. I came to New York, and when I started sharing my journey, they texted, they said, wow, like you look so happy, genuinely happy. There's just something within you that you truly believe in, and you look great, and it's really shining through. So, I didn't show them the bad parts of Judaism. Oh, I can't eat a cheeseburger. It's like, but I'll still hang out with you guys. I'm still a normal person. I just wore a skirt and I was sneeze, but you throw some style in there and you just look completely normal. So, uh, the way I introduced them to it, I believe, was just in a natural, I'm normal, not a religious freak, light. So I got positive feedback from them as well.
It's so nice. I'm so glad that you had all that. So now, how long have you been Jewish for? When was your conversion? How long ago was it?
It's been too long. I don't even remember anymore. I think May 30th, 2022.
Okay. Wow. And so you picked your name, correct?
Yes.
What made you pick Tehila?
I picked Tehila just because I really wanted something a little bit different, more, I guess, exotic, or, something different. And it just really spoke to me. I would go on my Jewish girl names and I would scroll like every so often. And I just liked it and it stuck. So,
Okay, cool. Growing up, I had a friend of mine. Her English name was Tammy, but her Hebrew name was Tehila. And in the summer, I was always with her in the summer. I didn't go to school with her. She was one of my camp friends. And in camps I went to, we'd always have learning groups. So midday, we'd have a learning group. And this one rabbi, he always would call her Fame. So he would tell her her name is Fame. And that's what he would call her all the time. So it always stuck in my head. Tehila, Fame. So it's like, okay. But it's a very beautiful name. Tehila, Tehillim,
yes,
all beautiful references.
yes. And David Hamelech, right, wrote Tehillim. And
Right?
he's a descendant of Rus, who was a Gyaris.
Very nice.
So it was just all,
All connected. Ooh, I like that. I didn't even put that together. Very nice. I like that connection. Very cool. I like that. A product. Very good.
yeah.
So now when you look at Judaism, what is like one of your favorite traditions or holidays now that you've been in it for a bit?
So I'll tell you, it's hard to decide because I've noticed that when I first was learning about Judaism, it was great. Everything was exciting and confusing, and it was just a kind of a balgan, right? But when I went to seminary and had that seminary experience, and every time there was a yontif, we would learn about it and we would delve deep into it and behind the meaning, behind the purpose, about everything yontif. That was my favorite holiday then. Why? Because I was prepared, because I learned about it. And, you know, I was talking to my husband. I'm like, things are just the same as when I was in seminary. I would get so excited. It'd feel like yontif. And he's like, yeah, it happens sometimes. People are on a high, they come back, and it's like, oh, you're back to real life. So now that I'm back to real life, my favorite holiday or tradition or my favorite yontif is really one that I prepare for and that I have the time to, go deep into. And then I'm like, this is going to be the best yontif ever. Like last Pesach, I, listened to so many shiurim. I had so many questions, and I went in like, this is going to be the best Pesach ever. And then like Shavuos came around, and I'm like, oh man, um, and it's just like you just go into the yontif sometimes. So really, I love them all, but the best ones that I experience are the ones that I prepare for, and I feel like that's with anybody.
Yes, and I just wanted to bring that out. I think whoever's listening, the takeaway for me, they could take away whatever they want, but I would say a very strong takeaway from this episode for them, Tehila, would be how you are emphasizing the importance of preparing. A lot of times we go through life as robots and we just go through it and go through it. And then people, like, this is my pet peeve about Pesach and the Seder. And I used to tell people who would be running a Seder, you can't just show up to the Pesach Seder and not have prepared on how you're going to present it. You're like the teacher for the night.
Yeah.
And just like was a classroom teacher for 28 years, I needed to prepare my lessons. And so the head of the household needs to prepare. How are you going to present it? Now, maybe you're not a natural teacher, so then you need help. You need guidance. You have to research creative ways of doing it. What would work best for you? And maybe if you're not that person, maybe you have to be creative and say, who am I going to have at my Seder that can do it? Who could I pass the torch to so that it can be a positive experience? But every holiday, there should be prep. It's not just women prepping in the kitchen and preparing their menus and I mean like nonstop. And what are they going to make for this meal and that meal? Where is the prep inside for myself to be ready for that holiday and to have that excitement? So I think that's a beautiful takeaway for anybody that's listening about the importance of preparing for our Jewish life.
It's so important. In Jewish 2.5 years now, I'm already saying it. I can't believe people who've been Jewish their whole life. We're all missing out. So like I'm trying to chap. I get the tips and tricks,
So important to prepare. I love that. Now with like I said, I had interviewed other people and they were telling me about the actual experience of when the conversion time period when you had to take a dip for the first time in that mikvah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you asked any questions at that moment? Did they ask you any last minute questions?
Of course. Well, at that moment in my life, I was just so happy to be there. I know it's probably an awkward experience for many people, but me, I like cannonballed inside that thing. I'm like, oh, let's do it. Because it was a moment that I was waiting for a long time. And I was so excited. And I remember like getting ready in the mirror and I was brushing my hair and I was like starting to cry because I'm like, this is just such a holy moment. It was so fun. Not many people could say that. As many people will say it was probably traumatizing, but that's just my personality. I'm like, hey, let's do it. It's like a doctor. They see, they come, they go, whatever. They just think it's a job. So there I am in the mikvah, right? And it actually helped because I wear glasses and right now I have contacts, so like I couldn't really like I could see, so that helped a lot also. But the rabbis were there, and I actually have it recorded. My friends were there and they recorded it, so I could double check what they asked me. But I remember what they asked me was, do I just like the basic? Do I reject? All other gods except Hashem? Do I accept the 613 mitzvahs? Just basic stuff.
Nothing
Yeah,
technical.
I did hear horror stories before I went to the mikvah of other people of about like, I don't even know if this is true, might be made up, but like that the rabbis like asked them like, are you sure you're not going to eat at your mother's house ever again? And the person's like, what? I can't do it. I can't become Jewish. But it's just like, that's just like a funny story that I heard. And I'm like, when I was there in that moment, I was just so happy to be there. And like I said, I was completely transformed from the person when I started to when I ended. I was a different person. And after, the mikvah experience, I remember a really holy moment. There's a kosher Dunkin' Donuts in Chicago that everyone goes to. And I made my first bracha on a hash brown in the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot. And it was amazing. Like I went Dunkin', now like Dunkin'.
I love that. So cute, Tehila.
And I was sitting there in the parking lot and I made my bracha and I just like felt my neshama like dancing. Like sometimes you get like excited. Like I really felt like another being was inside me. This probably people think I'm crazy, but that's how it really felt like. I was so like excited, like internally that it really felt like my neshama was dancing. It was great.
Cute. Duncan, my soul danced.
Yes.
I love that. I love that. Very, very cute. You should know, anybody that I interviewed, no one felt it was traumatic. No one that I had spoken to so far felt the mikvah experience was traumatic at all. I was just curious because I did get 2 waves of questions. Some people spoke about questions like you said, more like global type questions, like, are you sure this is what you want to do? And then I interviewed like 1 or 2 people that they got like really technical halachic questions. How do you do this on Shabbos? And she's like, you're asking me now?
That was so funny.
But she didn't find it traumatic. She just thought it was like, why are you asking me this now? Like, yeah, that's insane. So everybody has different experiences, but no one had a negative experience that I spoke to. So I'm just wanted to, so that's it. So you're the first person that I'm interviewing, believe it or not, I'm trying to go through it, that became Jewish before they got married. So meaning you had to date as a convert. That's you understand what I'm saying? Whereas some other people I interviewed, they were already dating somebody and that led them to the conversion process, or they converted with their spouse.
Yes.
Okay. So you're the first person in this category. So I'm going to ask you this question because I couldn't have asked it to anybody else because it didn't pertain to them. Dating as a convert, was that challenging in the Jewish circles?
It for sure did come with its challenges. My dating life started really in seminary. That's when I met my first shadchan.
How was that? Was that like weird to you? Or just like blind dates?
No, she was so nice. And she's dealt with a lot. So when I was in Neve, there was a specific shadchan who deals with like Bali Tshuva, and I don't know, it was really nice. But I don't think I was necessarily ready yet. I was just having FOMO because when I was in seminary, like, what do girls talk about? Like the dorm food, like Ben Yehuda and shadchanim and dating, right? And boys. So I was having FOMO. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll like meet a shadchan because I just wanted to fit in. I wanted to have my own dating stories. I went on a few dates, but obviously nothing happened then. And dating as a convert, a big thing, like just like anyone who's dating, I would always get red people who were also Gerim. And I'm just like, no, I want a from family. Sorry, guys. But like, it's like convert. Oh, shit. Like,
right.
I understand.
Tall, let's match them. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I did experience those similarities in terms of my own categories that I was put into. And yeah, I met one shadchan. Maybe I met another one when I came back, but nothing really came of that. And the way that I met my husband was through a friend.
Right. Beautiful.
So it just happened naturally. It was really short lived. But yeah, I don't know. Dating could be very complicated just because it comes down to, okay, you need a resume. Okay, what school did you go to? Okay, who are your parents? And it's like, you don't want to put all that. Like, we're in 2024. I'm a Yaris. Like, you don't want to know I went to East Leiden High School.
But I think that's very beautiful where you put out there that you want to be able to have that Jewish home. Like so many young Jewish families, the holidays, you want to spend it with family. And if you have one convert with another convert, there are pluses to that because you could have similar backgrounds or similar life experiences a little bit, but yet perhaps you want to be able to move forward and be able to build a home, and you want to look at another home that you can emulate or be around. So I can understand that 100%. That makes a lot of sense. Wow. So now how do you see your role in the Jewish community? Now you're Jewish. What do you see your role as, or are you still trying to figure that out? Like, what do you hope to contribute to the Jewish community?
I want to contribute whatever I can. If that means showing up and sharing my story on a podcast and being vulnerable and sharing where I come from, then that's what I have to do. Social media has really had a huge influence and impact on many people out there. It's such an amazing tool if used correctly, because it could be dangerous as well. Um, so, you know what? Whatever. I'm a worker of Hashem. Wherever I go, whatever I do, like I said, in any single way I act, that's how I try to envision myself. I mean, we all are, right? We're all just little pieces of Hashem. And I really hope to do my best to give what I can to all of Klal Yisrael.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now I have this interesting question that I've been ending all my podcasts with for this season. I always try to do something a little different. And that is, which one of your 5 senses, Tehila, is your strongest? And how does that play out in your Judaism?
Are you talking about my senses, like my smell, my hearing?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Your 5 senses. Yeah. Which one of your 5 senses do you connect with the most? And how does it play out in Judaism?
That's such an interesting question. Right. I guess for me, I mean, I'm just going to pick the most obvious one, but is the vision.
Okay. For you, that's obvious. It wasn't obvious for somebody else, but go ahead. Go with it.
So for me, for myself, I guess, Yiddishkeit is beautiful. And even though your eyes see, you do have to open them to see the beauty in Yiddishkeit. And throughout my journey, I'm so grateful that, Hashem showed me the opportunity to open my eyes, because when I started meeting Jewish people, they weren't across the world. They weren't hundreds of thousand miles away. They were 25 minutes from my house. And all I had to do was open my eyes and look around me and be mindful of what I was seeing and internalize it. And it changed my life completely.
So beautiful. If I had to guess after listening to you for a bit now, I was going to guess along those lines. See that? I'm so glad we're friends. I know you a little bit, but when you were just giving over your story, you were right. It's obvious from how you expressed everything about, for you, it's sight, but it's just not stam. It's not just simple sight. It's a vision that's of understanding. And that really represents who you are, Tehila. Well, is there anything else you want to share before we say goodbye, Tehila, that you'd like to say about the conversion process or anything else?
Let's think. This one I wasn't prepared for. At the top of my head. I don't know.
Okay.
Everyone just be the best Jew that you could be, even though it's hard. But, we all do the best that we can. And we just keep going every single day. And it's just so amazing to be a part of Klal Yisrael. And I'm still very excited to be here. 2.5 years strong, no regrets ever. No, I'm joking. But really, it's such a beautiful life, and I would give it my old life up again and again, and I wouldn't go back ever. I'm just so happy to be here. So thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share a little bit.
Oh, my pleasure. And I'm so happy you're with us and you're part of our community. Such a fresh perspective and an inspiring perspective. And I think a lot of people will gain from this. So thank you, Tehila, for joining.
Anytime, Jordana. Thank you so much.